Broke rancher wed plump stranger for a cow. That night she locked the door. Kansas, 1884. The night was too still for comfort. Sam Carver stood at the edge of his porch, rifle tight in his hands, the barrel catching faint moonlight. Down the dirt road, 6 riders emerged, torches burning like hungry eyes in the dark. At the front rode Frank Barlow, his face half-shadow, and beside him the territorial marshal, grim as judgment. "Carver." Barlow's voice cracked the silence. "You've got 1 minute to come out and hand her over." Behind Sam, inside the locked farmhouse, Lydia Hunt clutched a leather folder. Every page inside a death sentence for Barlow if it ever reached a federal court. The riders spread out, torchlight licking the dry grass. Sam could smell the kerosene. 1 spark and the yard would be a wall of fire. He had 60 seconds, maybe less. Not long ago, Sam Carver's life had been ordinary, almost dull in its simplicity. He'd had a sturdy homestead, a clapboard house he'd built himself, with a windmill that creaked in the prairie wind, and pastures that stretched to the horizon. He'd planted corn and kept a modest herd, enough to see him through hard winters without needing help from anyone. But in Kansas, a man's plans could be undone by something as silent and merciless as the weather. The drought came without warning. 4 months without rain, under a sun that baked the soil into something harder than brick. His corn withered into yellow dust, his pasture became cracked earth, and the cattle dropped one by one, ribs showing through their hides until there were only 3 left, too lean to fetch any real price. Sam had tried to hold on, selling tools, working other men's fields for scraps, anything to pay the interest on his loan. But the bank had no patience for sentiment. The letters came first, polite threats inked in black, and when he ignored them, the man from Topeka arrived with the foreclosure notice in hand. Sam had 6 weeks to vacate the land. He'd sat at his kitchen table that night, the lamplight dim, a bottle of rye open beside him. Pride was a heavy thing, heavier than any debt, and it crushed him harder than the bank's numbers ever could. His father had built this farm. His mother was buried on the hill behind the orchard, and he would be the Carver who lost it all. When Frank Barlow came riding up the next morning, Sam thought it was another creditor. But Barlow wasn't there to collect. He was there to bargain. Barlow leaned against the fence, chewing a straw, his fine coat dusty from the road. He spoke like a man offering charity, but every word was a hook. "I hear you're short on cattle," Barlow said, eyeing the 3 bony cows in Sam's yard. "And short on cash." "I'll manage," Sam muttered, though they both knew it was a lie. "That so?" Barlow's smile was thin. "See, I've got a daughter, Marianne. Sweet girl. Needs a husband with strong hands, steady habits. I reckon you could be that man. And in return, I'll see you get a prize heifer from my herd. Bloodline worth more than your whole spread right now. That heifer's calf next spring could pay your bank note." Sam stared at him. "You want to trade your daughter for a cow?" Barlow chuckled. "Don't be crude. I'm offering you a future. I get a reliable son-in-law to help run my northern pasture. You get to keep your land and stock." He said it like the terms were fair, like Sam wouldn't be selling the last of his freedom for a mouthful of hope. Sam thought of the empty fields, the 3 cows grazing like ghosts, the foreclosure date scrawled in red on the calendar. The cow would be healthy, the bank satisfied for now. He told himself he'd make the best of it. Maybe Marianne was kind. Maybe they could start fresh. He shook Barlow's hand before the part of him that still had pride could speak up. The wedding was small. No church. Just a preacher in Barlow's parlor. The faint smell of tobacco and old wood. Sam wore his Sunday coat. Marianne wore white lace that looked borrowed. Her face was pale, unreadable. When the preacher said, "Kiss the bride," she turned her cheek. They rode back to Sam's farm in silence. The cow Barlow promised stood in a borrowed pen, big-eyed and healthy, and Sam tried to be grateful. Tried not to notice the way Marianne's hands trembled when she unlocked the house door. That night, when the wind howled outside and the lamplight trembled on the walls, Marianne locked the bedroom door behind her. Sam was halfway to asking what was wrong when she spoke first. "My name isn't Marianne," she said. her voice low but steady. "It's Lydia Hunt." The words were like a match struck in a dark room. "I'm not Barlow's daughter," she went on. "I'm here because Barlow murdered my brother for his land. He tried to make it look like a range accident, but I saw the men he paid to do it. He doesn't know I was there. I changed my name, took this marriage to get close to him. Tonight, I was going to poison him." Sam stared at her. "Poison him?" She nodded toward her satchel in the corner. "The bottle's in there. But I found out yesterday it's useless, watered down. The man I bought it from took my money and sold me nothing." Sam felt the room tilt. The woman in front of him was not a wife, not a stranger. She was a storm that had walked into his life with purpose. "And you thought marrying me was the way in? You were desperate. I needed a way into his household. I thought maybe I could survive long enough to get my chance." Her gaze didn't waver. "But it's over now. I'll go. You can tell him you were fooled. He'll believe you." Sam sat heavily on the bed. He'd been planning something himself. Months of quiet work with a federal contact out of St. Louis, gathering proof of Barlow's cattle thefts, forged deeds, and the land grab that had cost 3 families their homes. Barlow was dangerous, but his arrogance made him sloppy. The folder in his desk held enough to put the man away for 20 years. "You're not going anywhere," Sam said finally. "I've been building a case against him. Not for your brother, but for a dozen other crimes. You want justice? Then help me. We wait for the right moment. No poison, no mistakes. We do this so it sticks." Lydia looked at him as if weighing the truth in his voice. "You trust me that easily?" "No," Sam said. "But I trust your hate for Barlow." Something flickered in her eyes, a flash of reluctant agreement. "Then we wait," she said. And for a time they did. But out on the prairie, patience was as fragile as grass in the wind. Night pressed against the windows like a held breath. The storm that had threatened at sundown never came, only the long dry wind scuffing across the yard. In the small bedroom, Lydia Hunt, Marian no longer, stood with her back to the locked door, the lamplight giving her features a pale, determined glow. The satchel on the floor was worn to threads at the corners. The bottle inside clinked faintly when the house settled. "I was going to put it in his evening tonic," she said. 2 drops would stop his heart before he could call a name. Sam watched her hands. They were not the hands of a fine man's daughter. Scar at the knuckle, faint burn near the wrist, the impatient tremor of someone who had been running too long. She carried herself with the steadiness of necessity. When she bent to open the satchel, the lamplight showed a bruise on her shoulder, yellowing at the edges. It was not new. He lifted the bottle, tipped a bead on the back of his thumbnail, touched it to his tongue. Bitter than nothing. She was right. Nothing that would stop a rabbit, much less Frank Barlow. "Who sold this to you?" he asked. "A man in Abilene with a preacher's smile," she said. "He said it would leave no sign a coroner could name. I think he meant it would leave no sign because it was water." She sat on the edge of the bed and put her face in her hands. The gesture was not weakness. It was calculation running into a wall. When she looked up again, the fury had cooled into something far more dangerous. "I came to marry his daughter and sit at his table until I had my chance," she said. "But the poison was a fool's errand, and I am done playing the fool." Sam set the bottle on the washstand. The mirror there caught his own face, older than he remembered, the drought's fine cracks etched into his brow. The house was quiet except for the windmill ticking. The cow Barlow had delivered load once in the dark, unsettled by nothing and everything. "Tell me about your brother," he said. "Evan Hunt," she answered. "He owned a strip of bottomland that hurt Barlow's appetite. Barlow wanted to fold the river bend into his fence and call it his own. Evan wouldn't sell. So a month later he was thrown from his horse in a place where the road was straight and smooth as a table. They said the animal spooked. Evan never had a spooking horse in his life." Her mouth tightened. "I washed his shirt. There was red clay on the cuff. There's no red clay on that road. But there's plenty by the ravine where Barlow's men dug post holes they didn't set. He had them wait there, and when my brother rode past they ran a wire across the cut. You know the rest. Sam did. He had seen fence wire used to break a man's neck. He wondered if the banks wrote ledgers for such costs, and if God did. How did you get close enough to take the marriage? He asked. Lydia's eyes flicked to him, measuring how much to trust. Barlow has another daughter, she said softly. Had, Marian. We met as girls at a quilting bee years ago, when he still pretended the town could be charmed into loving him. She was kind. We became friends when no one was looking. She knew I loved my brother, knew he loved that river land, knew he would never give it up. I think she knew what her father would do before I did. The lamplight fluttered. Lydia's voice lowered, not from softness, but to keep it from breaking. Marian tried to warn Evan. She rode out alone, took him the letter I wrote begging him to come to town and stay the night. Barlow found her saddled before she left the yard. She didn't come back. 2 days later they buried Evan, and Barlow told the town his daughter had gone to live with an aunt back east. The room drew small around the truth. Sam sat on the trunk by the wall and felt the old floorboards shift under his weight. You took her name. I took her ghost, Lydia said. If I wore it well enough, I could sit inside the walls that killed them both. He thought of the handshake he had given Barlow to save a patch of wasted earth, of the preacher's words and the lace veil and the way the young woman's cheek had turned away from his mouth. He thought of the bankman's letter and the tight circle of the noose it threatened. He had told himself the marriage was survival. He tasted the shame of that lie. Lydia reached into the satchel again and pulled out a folded packet wrapped in oilcloth. She held it as people hold a thing they would die to keep from the fire. I am not empty-handed, she said. This is why I risked the marriage, not the bottle. I took it from Barlow's study the week before I walked to your porch. Sam did not take it yet. What is it? Deeds with forged signatures, she said. Purchase notes with dates that do not match the courthouse record. A letter from a surveyor paid to move a boundary marker by a chain and a half. A list of cattle tallies that don't square with the brand book. And one letter signed by the territorial marshal promising consideration in exchange for an envelope of cash. He let a long breath go. It was a breath he had been holding since the first time he had seen Barlow's men run fence across open range like knives. How did you lay hands on them? I learned his habits. Barlow drinks when he wins. He had just driven a widow off a claim south of the ridge, took the livestock as payment for a debt she never owed. He sat up late, grew careless, left the desk key in his waistcoat instead of the cigar box. Your parlor window faces his lamp. I watched the flame die. I have eyes like a coyote when I need them. Sam took the packet and set it on his knee. Oil had seeped into the edges of the papers, leaving translucent stains like old tears. He did not open it. You need help to make this travel, he said. I need a witness who can't be bought, she answered, and a place to stand that will not go up the moment Barlow strikes a match. The windmill ticked. Somewhere in the dark a nightjar called and answered itself. Lydia's gaze moved over the room, washstand, trunk, Bible. The small tin of seeds on the sill labeled spring. This house is tinder, she said, not unkindly. Sam stood and slid the packet into the false bottom of his desk drawer. He had cut that hollow years ago for a different kind of secret. It felt right to give it a better one. He did not yet tell her about the man in St. Louis who signed his telegraphs with a riverboat's name. Not yet. He watched her watch him, and he saw in her attention the old care of someone who had lived too long with traps. Do you have children? She asked suddenly. No, parents. Both gone. Then no one for Barlow to threaten but you. Me and the land, he said, and he heard how small it sounded in his own mouth. Lydia nodded, as if filing the ledger of what he would risk. She unlaced her boots and winced at a cut across the heel, the rawness where leather had bit into skin mile after mile. Sam went to the kitchen, drew water, brought the clean rag his mother had hemmed before her hands failed. He knelt and tipped the basin so she could wash. She watched him for the sign of pity. He offered none, only the work. When he finished, she pulled the blanket from the foot of the bed and wrapped it around her shoulders like a shawl. Neither of them suggested she take the bed or he the chair. They were strangers bound by a problem, not a vow. "Barlow will count the days," Lydia said. "He will notice when I don't return. He will come looking with torch and law." "I know," Sam said. "Then why did you open your door?" she asked. He could have said, "Because I was desperate, because I saw an answer wearing a white dress, because you carried the storm I needed to break my drought of courage." He said the truer thing. "Because you knocked." She looked at him as if that were either madness or mercy. In his experience there was not much difference when it mattered. She slept at last, back against the wall, one hand still on the satchel. Sam sat by the window and counted the slow minutes, the rifle across his knees like a promise he did not want to keep. Moonlight moved across the yard, thin as bone. He pictured the pages hidden in his desk and the signature of a marshal who would sell justice by the envelope. He pictured Barlow's fine smile and the way the town laughed at his stories while he emptied their pockets. He pictured Evan Hunt's horse trotting home riderless, still bridled, still faithful. Toward morning, he heard a wagon pass on the road, too early to be a neighbor, too quiet to be drunk. He watched the slow top roll by without torches. It did not stop. When the sun finally pushed a band of pale light under the eastern clouds, he stood and blew out the lamp. Lydia woke, already alert, as if her sleep had been only the pause between footsteps. "Coffee?" he asked. "If you have it." He boiled the last of the grounds twice. They drank it bitter without speaking. When she finished, she set the cup down with care, as if small sounds might stir something best left sleeping. "I have to keep my face in town a few days more," she said. "If I vanish now," Barlow closes his fist, "and the only thing we'll salvage is this house's ashes. I can be seen once or twice. Say the marriage was not consummated. Say I am staying with a cousin for the week. He will not believe it, but men like him enjoy the theater of pretending they do." "You're not going back under his roof," Sam said. "I'm going as far as Ellsworth and back," she said. "To leave copies where someone honest can find them if I do not return." She tapped the satchel. "Even a cowardly sheriff will not burn a widow's trunk without the whole town asking why it smells like law." He almost smiled. "You think the town asks much of Barlow." "They will when the asking is safe," she said. "Our task is to make it safe." The word "our" landed in the room like a stone dropped into a well. He heard the depth it found. "Then you are in need of a horse," he said. She shook her head. "They would take note of a woman riding out alone from your yard the morning after a wedding night. I'll go on foot by the creek bed, circle wide. Let my tracks drown in the willows. I learned such arts from following the men who killed my brother." She stood and tightened the laces on her boots. The bruise at her shoulder had darkened. She rolled it once and did not wince. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and in that domestic gesture there lay a life she might have had the world been kinder. "Sam," she said, and it was the first time she used his name like a shared thing. "When I come back, he will have moved faster than we plan. He will strike before the papers can travel, because that is how fear works, fast and at night. Be ready." "I am," he said. He wanted to tell her he had been ready for months, that a federal man with quiet boots was waiting on a signal, that he had drawn a map of Barlow's sins, every fence line and cattle count and hand paid to move a stone. But something in him waited one more breath, one more hour. He feared to say the plan aloud was to tear it like old cloth. She unlocked the door as a woman does who has learned to listen before she moves. The yard lay empty, bleached, patient. The windmill turned and turned. She slipped into the morning and was gone. Sam stood in the doorway long after the latch fell back. The house smelled of lamp smoke and coffee and the iron tang of a plan unsheathed. He moved to the desk, lifted the false bottom, and checked the packet once more, as if touch could keep it from vanishing into some thief's pocket by the simple witchcraft of chance. He took out a sheet of paper and wrote the name of the riverboat that signed the federal telegrams. He wrote a time and a place, the rise above the cottonwoods where a man could look 3 miles in every direction and not be seen. He folded the note and sealed it under wax. then wrapped it in brown paper and addressed it not to a man but to a crate at the depot that only one clerk in St. Louis knew to open. Before he saddled his horse, he walked to the hill behind the orchard and stood by the 2 small stones that marked his parents' rest. The grass there was brown as rope. He did not pray. He told the stones the truth, that a woman had come to his door who would force him to become what he had not dared to be, and that the cost would be whatever it needed to be. By noon he had ridden to the telegraph and paid for words he did not put his name under. By sundown he had returned, repaired the hinge on the back door, counted his cartridges, and stood once more at the window as the first stars opened like quiet eyes. The day had not brought rain. The sky felt like something waiting to break. Just after dark, a single lamp burned in his front room and then was turned low. He let it sit that way, a heartbeat on the prairie. When he climbed to the loft to mend the seam in his rifle sling, he heard, very far off, the sound of metal on stone, horses being careful where the road grew rutted. He went still and counted between the sounds. He did not yet lift the rifle. Not yet. He thought of Lydia walking the willow beds, of the papers folded against her ribs, of the grave she wore in place of her name. He thought of need, the kind that enters a house not as begging but as invitation to courage. He thought of the minute a man is given to choose. Outside, coyotes sang and fell silent. Somewhere beyond the cottonwoods a night rider paused to let his horse drink, and the splash carried like whispered talk. Sam leaned his head against the cool wood of the window frame and closed his eyes. "Tomorrow," he said to the empty room. "Tomorrow we stop pretending." Sam didn't throw her out. He moved a step closer instead, lowering his voice until it was barely more than the sound of breath. "You won't kill Barlow with poison," he said. "Not tonight, not ever. But you and I might bring him down together if we're careful." Her eyes sharpened, searching him for the hook in his words. "You've been planning something. Months of work. Federal agents are already circling him. They just need proof strong enough to lock the door and throw away the key. Those papers you've got? They might be it." The lamp between them flickered once, casting her face in a momentary mask of doubt. She looked at him for a long second, measuring his tone, reading the way his shoulders carried the weight of his words. Then she gave one quick nod, a signal that felt like the tightening of a knot. But the night outside didn't wait for plans. The first sound came low and distant, like someone drumming on the earth. A slow, steady rhythm that began to swell. Sam stiffened. Hoofs, many of them. Then the orange shimmer of fire bled over the ridge. Torches, 6 at least, swinging in the dark. The riders came into view like a nightmare pulled out of the ground itself. At their head was Frank Barlow, his face caught in the glow, and beside him rode the territorial marshal, his jaw hard as stone. "They're early," Sam muttered. Lydia stepped to the window, her fingers tightening around the folder at her chest. "Someone told them," she whispered. The words were stripped bare, no surprise, no doubt. Sam didn't need to name the betrayal. He swung the rifle up to his shoulder, stepped out onto the porch and aimed at the largest torch, the one Barlow himself carried high. The crack of the shot split the stillness. Sparks flared, the torch burst apart, and the yard fell into sudden darkness. The riders' shouts broke like a wave. The glow of the other torches swung wildly, throwing jagged shadows over the fence line. Some riders kicked forward, others pulled wide, trying to pen the house in. Inside, Lydia slammed the crossbar into place on the front door. "We can't hold them," she said. "We don't have to," Sam answered, working the rifle's lever. "Just long enough." Her voice was tight. "For what?" He gave a grim smile without looking at her. That lamp in the window wasn't for decoration. From the far ridge to the west, a faint answering blink of light flashed, then another farther down. Lydia caught her breath. "Federal men," Sam said. "Been waiting on my word." That lamp was the word. Barlow's voice boomed from the dark before hope could take root. "Bring her out, Carver. Bring her out, or we burn you alive." Lydia's grip on the folder tightened. "If they get me, they get the papers. If they get the papers, he walks free." Sam chambered another round. "Then they won't get you." The first rider broke from the line, charging hard. Sam's rifle barked again, the man spilling from the saddle into the dust. Another horse screamed in panic as its rider pulled hard away from the porch. From the ridge, rifles opened up, the sharp, clean reports of trained men. Bullets hissed through the dark. The yard erupted into chaos. Riders scrambled for cover, some darting toward the barn to flank the house. Sparks leapt as bullets struck iron. The dry grass trembled under pounding hooves. The smell of kerosene and black powder twisted in the air. "Carver!" Barlow's voice was hoarse now, cut ragged by rage. "You'll hang for this." Sam sighted down the barrel, forcing him to duck behind his horse. "Better me than her." Lydia was already at the side window, peering through the smoke and dark. She could see them now, federal agents moving in from the ridge, advancing in pairs. Their shapes were steady, deliberate, closing. One figure broke ahead of the line, a tall man in a long coat, his stride unhurried even in the fight. When he spoke, his voice cut through the noise like a bell. "Frank Barlow, Marshal, you are under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and theft of federal lands." For the first time that night, Barlow's movements faltered. The marshal's curse was lost under the crack of a rifle from the ridge. A bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him in the saddle before he crashed to the dirt. Barlow looked over his shoulder, gauging the odds, then tried to wheel his horse away, but the agents were already too close. A rope whistled through the air, catching his arm and jerking him half out of the saddle. Another loop closed around his wrist. In seconds, two men had him on the ground, his gun kicked away. The rest of the riders, seeing their leaders taken, began to drop weapons. One agent swept the barn, another the rear of the house, until the yard was filled with nothing but the heavy breathing of disarmed men and the hiss of dying torches. Sam lowered his rifle, the wood warm against his palms. He stepped down off the porch as Lydia came to stand beside him, the wind tugging her hair loose from its pins. She looked past the prisoners to the man in the long coat. "It's over," she said. The agent shook his head, his eyes still moving over the scene. "Not until we have every name, every deed, every lie nailed down so tight it can't wriggle loose in court." Lydia opened the folder, the lamplight from the porch spilling over the ink. "Then you'll want to see these." The agent took the papers, flipping through quickly. His lips pressed thin. This is more than we hoped for." Barlow snarled from the ground, twisting against the rope. "You think you've won, Carver? You don't know the half of it." Sam's voice was quiet, but it carried. "I know enough." The agent signaled his men. The marshal, bleeding but alive, was hauled upright and bound. Barlow was dragged to his feet, his hat falling into the dust. One of the agents kicked it aside. The last torch guttered out, leaving only the pale light of the moon across the yard. The federal men began marching their prisoners toward the ridge, their silhouettes shrinking against the dark horizon. Lydia stood beside Sam, neither of them speaking for a long moment. Then she turned to him. "When I came here, I thought you were a man trying to save his land." "I was," Sam said. "And now?" He looked toward the empty road where the riders had vanished. "Now I'm a man who knows what it's worth to keep it." She gave a small, tired smile and drew her coat tighter. "We're not done." "No," he said. "But tonight was a start." The night did not break. It tightened. From the road came 6 riders with torches lifted high, fire painting their faces in quick, cruel flashes. Frank Barlow rode in front like a man certain the world would move if he told it to. Beside him, the territorial marshal sat square in the saddle, a mailed fist wrapped in a badge. "Carver," Barlow called, voice big with borrowed law. "Bring her out. Bring the papers. Do it now, and you live to see morning." Sam didn't answer. His house was built of old pine and memory. It would burn like confession. Behind him, the front door was barred and Lydia was inside with the folder pressed to her chest like a child she meant to save. The 6 spread into the yard, torches licking dry grass, boots grinding the dust. A thin breeze ran its fingers over the prairie and never found water. Kerosene and horse sweat thickened the air. The marshal raised a hand. 1 minute, Carver, he shouted. You give us the woman and what she stole, or I'll sign this place a bright goodbye. Sam leveled the rifle at the highest flame. He breathed once, held it, squeezed. The torch in Barlow's hand burst into a shower of sparks. The horses screamed. Men swore. The other torches wavered, swung, clawed light back from the night in clumsy arcs. Barlow's voice went hard. Fan out. Barnwell, the back door. He's got her inside. Sam slid behind the porch post and worked the lever, brass winking in the lamplight leaking from a side window. A second rider surged forward. Sam stitched a warning into the dirt at his horse's hooves, and the animal slammed back on its haunches. The rider tumbled off, cursing. Inside, wood scraped and the bar thudded into place across the rear door. Lydia's voice came low through the wall. 2 circling the well. 1 by the corn crib. The marshal's right of your porch rail. Barlow. He's hunting the window like a mirror. How do you know? Sam whispered. I know the way men hunt when they think God owes them the kill. He risked a glance. Barlow had slid down from his horse and was easing along the porch edge. Torch held low, pistol high, trying to throw light into angles. The marshal loomed by the gate, calling counts to the men like a schoolmaster. Hold the yard. Pair off. Watch the roofline. Who told them? Lydia asked. Sam thought of the depot clerk who always kept his head bent too politely over the ledgers, of the neighbor who had asked too many questions about the new heifer, of the telegraph operator whose wire sang for Barlow at election time. He thought of himself, of the lamp he'd put in the window to call help. Doesn't matter now, he said. They know enough to smell blood. I can run, she said. Take them away from the house. I've done it before. He heard the lie only because he had told lies with the same steadiness. No, Sam. No. You don't buy justice with your body. Not anymore. A pause. He could feel her standing with her palm against the inner wall, as if that thin plank between them could carry truth. Then give me the other thing. What other thing? The one you haven't said. The help. He swallowed. There are federal men. They'll come if they see the lamp. If the clerk in Ellsworth isn't bought. If the wire wasn't cut. If. Then your breath is counting maybes while their fire counts minutes, she said. Buy us time. On the porch, Barlow tipped his torch. A bright tongue touched the step and went out. Old wood had soaked up years of dust and grief, but not enough oil to take quickly. The marshal swore, angry at the night for refusing to behave. Last call, Carver, he roared. We take her and the folder now, or we take your house and anything alive in it. Folder, Sam yelled back. You mean the one that says you take money from a man like Barlow to aim your law like a hired gun? A small silence found the yard. Men don't like hearing their own names tied to the wrong kind of truth. Barlow recovered first. Your bride is a liar and a thief, he called, with the bright cheer of a gambler explaining a rule that lets him keep the pot. She isn't who you think. I know who she is, Sam said. He slid along the porch, put his shoulder to the wall, and fired blind into the barn door. The shot clanged off the iron latch and rang out across the prairie like a bell. The 2 shapes by the well fell back. The torchlight went unsteady again. Marshal? A man near the corn crib shouted. We ain't paid to die in the dark. You're paid to follow orders, the marshal said, which is what men say when they don't want to hear their own fear. Sam dropped, rolled, felt splinters bite his palms. A bullet chewed a strip off the post where his head had been. He slid inside, kicked the door shut, dropped the bar. Lydia stood by the window. The lamp wick turned so low its flame was a single thread. The folder lay open on the table, pages fanned like cards. Her face was pale with the carefulness of a woman deciding where to spend a life. Take the decoy, she said. What decoy? She lifted a second folder from under the tablecloth, same leather, same weight. Copies I made last week. Enough to look real, not enough to be. You walk it to the porch, let them see it from the yard. Then throw it under the wagon and shoot the oil cask. Let the wrong proof burn. Sam frowned. And the real? In the flour bin, she said. Bottom in oilcloth. She watched his eyes. I cook. Men don't sift. He almost smiled. Smart. It's cheaper than poison. Outside, a rider crept to the window, his torch tip trying to sneak a line of flame under the sill. Lydia lifted the lamp higher. In the far dark beyond the yard, a pale flash answered. One, then two. Quickly smothered. Sam felt his lungs go wide. They see it, he said. Then we have to live long enough for them to come, she said. Do the decoy. He took the false folder, waited, breathed once, then unbarred the door. Heat and smoke brushed his face. Barlow, he shouted, stepping into the porch light. You want your confession? Here. The torchlight surged. For barrels found him at once. Easy. Barlow snapped, as if he were talking to spooked cattle. Let him throw it out. Sam swung the folder down and skidded it across the dirt. The marshal waved a man forward. The man crouched, hand out, and Sam put a bullet in the ground between the fingers and the leather. I said look, not take. Laughter crawled up the fence line, nervous, sharp. He's playing, someone said. Barlow leaned his shoulder against a post and squinted. Open it, he said. Just a leaf. Enough to see the handwriting we paid for. Sam flipped the cover with the rifle tip. Page lifted. Names. Tallies. Numbers that made fences move and rivers shrink. The marshal breathed. A sound like a man stepping into cool water. Good, he said. Real enough. Sam stepped back. Under the wagon, he said, and kicked it there. He took 2 steps toward the kitchen door. Lydia, he called like a husband asking for a match. She knew. She struck the lamp higher and slid the back window. In the same breath, Sam fired at the oil cask by the axle. Flame rose like an opening mouth. Heat slapped the yard. Men jumped. The decoy folder went to ash with a hungry whisper. Damn you, Barlow shouted, swinging his pistol up. Get water. No, the marshal snapped. Smoke will bring neighbors. Take the house. Kill the light. They surged. 3 toward the back door. 2 toward the porch. 1 stayed to kick dirt at the wagon fire and swore when it bit his boots. Sam ducked in as the first shoulder hit the front. The bar shook. Lydia had already dragged the table against the rear. She pointed to the flour bin and he took the real folder, slid it into the false bottom of a crate, then into the cold ashes of the stove, then behind the brick his father had never mortared square. It was old work, hiding true things in crooked places. Guns? She asked. Enough. Bullets. Enough to be stupid if we're greedy, smart if we're patient. The front door shook again. A hinge squealed. Lydia lifted the kitchen latch and eased it open 2 inches. On my count, she whispered. 1, 2. A boot smashed the front. Sam fired once, then again. Screams stacked in the doorway. Lydia slipped like water through the back crack, slid a knife along a bootlace, and a man fell hard with his legs suddenly useless. She took his pistol and came inside again before his friends had time to say her name in any language. Stairs, Sam said, and they climbed to the loft while the house filled with the smell of cooked kerosene and frightened men trying to sound brave. They lay flat behind the low wall, listening to boards complain under unfamiliar weight. The marshal's voice came, lower now, careful. He's got angles up there. Keep your heads. Marshal, Barlow hissed. We ain't dying for a woman and a stack of paper. You'll die for what you signed. Then, Lydia said, almost conversationally, and 3 gun barrels jerked up the stairs as if truth itself had stepped onto the landing. Sam used the jerk. He put a shot into the banister post. Splinters screamed, men ducked, and he moved cat-quick to the other end of the loft. Lydia, already there, smashed the lamp chimney and flung the oil across the wall. A narrow curtain of flame sprang up, a hot, bright line that cut the loft's mouth in half. Fire! Someone yelled, stepping back on the stair in panic. Controlled, the marshal snapped, but his voice carried fear he hadn't budgeted for. It's a herding flame. Like cattle, Lydia murmured. Men go where you leave them to go. Window, Sam said. 3 will try it. They did. The first put his shoulder to the sash and Lydia met him with the butt of a pistol, then the heel of her palm. He toppled backward onto his friend. Both slid in a hard knot down the porch roof and hit the yard as a single curse. The third froze half in and Sam's boot found the man's wrist with a crunch that ended argument. The pistol fell, thumped the porch, went off once, and somewhere a horse screamed and tore loose. Carver, Barlow called. Horse. This ends now. It does, Sam said, and then the sound that had not been in the night finally was. A far, clean rifle crack that didn't belong to Barlow's men. Then another. The yard answered with surprise and hurt. Lydia's eyes found his in the wavering light. You were right. He did not smile. Not yet. We still have to live long enough to hand them the truth. The marshal's voice turned. It lost the big room confidence and found the quick math of a cornered man. Out. Out of the house. Get to cover. A bullet punched the front window from the dark and blew a torch into sparks. Barlow swore. Where in hell? West Ridge, Sam said. East too, Lydia answered, head tilted, listening the way some listen for rain. They split like careful men. Footsteps pounded down the stairs. The front door banged open. The yard filled with running, the kind men do when they can't tell if retreat is wisdom or panic. In the hiss and crack of burning wagon wood, Sam heard reins jerked, a horse stumbling, a man praying because there was nothing left to do with his mouth. Lydia touched his sleeve. If Barlow breaks, he'll run toward the corral. He keeps a fresh mount there when he wants to look poor in town and fast outside it. You've watched him long, Sam said. I learned the habits of my enemy, she said without pride. Stay, he said. I will, she said, and passed him the last good lamp. Unlit, like a blessing that knew its work. He went down the back stairs into smoke, low and quick. The kitchen door gave him the night. He slid along the shadow of the house and became the shadow. The yard had changed its mind. It belonged to neither side and both. He saw the marshal crawl to the trough, hand on shoulder, blood black in torch gloom. He saw a man he did not know kick free of a tangle of reins and run without his hat. A boy again in the worst way. He saw Barlow, hat low, back bent, head turned to measure the corral gate as if the gate were a calculation that could still come out in his favor. Barlow, Sam said, quiet as a thought. Not a challenge. A naming. Barlow spun and put a shot so close the air by Sam's ear rang. Sam fired back and missed on purpose, because missing with intent tells a man something different than missing by fear. It tells him you're close on purpose, and that fright wears another name. Mercy he hasn't earned yet. Don't be a fool, Barlow said. Give me the woman and you can keep your dust and your dead cows. She's not yours to take, Sam said. She's nobody, Barlow hissed, and then, as if the word had cut him too, he said more softly, she was always nobody. Even my own. He stopped, swallowing a name he didn't want to feed the dark. Your own what? Sam asked, though he knew. Barlow's eyes flicked toward the loft window, toward the thin line of fire, toward the lamp glimmer that had called something he didn't invite. My own mistake, he said. A new volley broke the fence plank beside them. Both men flinched. Barlow dove for the corral, got a hand on the gate rope, hauled. From the loft, Lydia's voice cut the yard like a bell struck once. Frank Barlow, my sister has a name. He looked up instinctively. That heartbeat cost him both rope and cover. Sam stepped in and drove his shoulder into Barlow's ribs. They hit the gate together. Would wind. The hinge pin blew. The gate sagged and stayed, half open like a mouth too tired to speak. Barlow swung hard, clipped Sam's cheek, brought the pistol up. Sam slammed the barrel away and it fired into the dust. Barlow's second swing met the butt of Sam's rifle and bones answered like dry branches. The pistol fell and Barlow's breath left him, replaced by an older sound. The one men make when they finally understand they are not owed tomorrow. Marshal! Barlow coughed. Cover! The marshal did not answer. He was busy with his own blood. Hoofs pounded past the windbreak. Shapes grew out of the night where the road turned into the yard. Dark coats. bright badges. Horses that didn't lather because their riders knew pace and kept it. Federal men, fanning neatly, voices low and sure. "Hands!" one barked. "Hands high!" Barlow froze, calculation flashing and failing behind his eyes. He started to lift his arms. Stopped. Looked at Sam. Found nothing in Sam's face that would save him. "Lydia!" Sam called, never taking his eyes off Barlow. "Stay! I'm here," she said, already at the kitchen door, the reel folder tight to her chest. Her face calm in a new way. The kind that comes when a woman sees the shape of the end she wanted and understands her work will not die with her. The federal horses checked. Men swung down. Ropes moved. Orders snapped shut like traps made for wolves. Barlow took one last breath as a free man, and in it Sam heard everything he was and had been: bright charm, clean boots, a quick mind bent to theft, the tireless hunger of a man who would rather remake a map than walk an honest mile. Thunder rolled somewhere without rain. The torches sputtered and spat their last. And the yard, the poor, stubborn yard that had been a home and a battleground and a ledger under the moon, held its breath for the next moment. The one when law met truth and had to decide whether to shake its hand or draw on it. The night around Sam Carver's farm seemed to shrink with every hoofbeat. Darkness pressed close, broken only by the faint glow from the torches outside. 6 riders had already surrounded the yard, their shapes moving like restless predators. Somewhere beyond them, more were coming. He could feel it in the air. Inside, Lydia Hunt stood at the window, her fingers tight around the leather folder. Every so often she glanced toward Sam as if weighing whether to trust him one more time. He didn't need to ask. He knew she was thinking about the fastest way to run. "We can't run," Sam said quietly, as though answering the thought she hadn't voiced. "Not with them closing in. They'll cut us down before we reach the fence." Lydia didn't look at him. "Then what?" Sam kept his voice level. "We make them wait. Stall them. Give the signal time to reach the men I trust." Outside, a torch swung high, casting a red flare across Frank Barlow's face. The territorial marshal sat beside him, his gloved hands folded over the pommel. They were speaking low to each other, too far away for the words to carry, but Sam knew their tone. Men deciding who would die first. He stepped to the door, planting himself in the frame so the torchlight fell across him. "Barlow," he called. "Marshal, I see you brought the whole county." The marshal's voice was cool. "Brought enough." His gaze shifted past Sam toward the house, where he no doubt imagined Lydia cowering in a corner. "We're not here to talk. Hand her over," Barlow added. "And the papers. Now." Sam felt Lydia's presence behind him, silent, tense. The urge to turn, to check that she was ready to move if it came to shooting, was strong, but he kept his eyes forward. "You're too early," he said, letting the words hang as though he knew something they didn't. "It worked." Barlow's frown deepened. The marshal's head tilted slightly, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "Too early for what?" Barlow asked. Sam let the pause stretch until it was almost a challenge. "Too early to finish this. You don't have enough men for the job you're planning. But keep waiting. Maybe you will." The marshal's gloved fingers twitched against the saddle leather. Sam knew he was pushing them, but buying even a few more minutes mattered. A rider shifted his torch, the flames licking higher, and Sam saw how dry the grass had become from the long summer. One thrown torch and the place would go up like kindling. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. "Barlow," he said, lowering his voice so it forced them to lean forward to hear. "You've been trying to bury the truth for years. Tonight you'll get buried with it." The words had the effect he wanted. Barlow stiffened, but before he could spit back, Sam lifted his rifle and fired. The crack split the night, and the torch in Barlow's hand exploded into a shower of sparks. Darkness swallowed the yard. Shouts erupted. Horses reared, their silhouettes shifting in the starlight as men tried to steady them. Sam backed into the house, bolting the door. "They'll come now," he told Lydia. "Get ready." In the sudden black outside, the riders regrouped. The marshal barked an order and boots hit the ground. They were dismounting. Lydia was at the window again, peering into the dark. For moving left, to right, they'll split and rush us. Sam checked the rifle, sliding fresh rounds into the magazine. We don't let them pin us down. Move between the front and back rooms. Make them think there's more than two of us. They'll burn the house, Lydia said. Not if they want what you're holding. For a heartbeat, only the crickets filled the air. Then came the sound, distant but growing, of more riders cresting the ridge. Torchlight flashed like fireflies in the distance. Lydia caught it first. That's them. Sam allowed himself the smallest nod. If your lamp was seen, yes. Outside, the marshal had heard it too. His voice snapped through the yard. Finish it before anyone else arrives. Feet pounded toward the porch. Sam swung the door open just enough to fire into the dark. 2 quick shots that dropped one of the rushing shadows. Another shot cracked from the side of the house. Lydia, her pistol steady. The new riders closed fast, their torches burning brighter than the first groups. Sam recognized the lead horseman by the glint of the badge over his coat. A real federal marshal, the one he'd been sending word to for months. Chaos broke like a summer storm. The newcomers charged straight into Barlow's men. Gunfire flared in sharp bursts, the smell of powder rolling over the yard. A torch hit the dirt and went out. Sam pushed the door wide, stepping into the fight. The real marshal's men had already driven 2 of Barlow's riders off into the dark. The crooked marshal stood his ground until a shot knocked the pistol from his hand, and then he was surrounded. Barlow tried to break for the fence, but Sam moved to cut him off. They met in the half-light. Barlow's mouth twisted in something between rage and fear. You'll hang for this, Barlow spat. Sam's voice was steady. No, but you will. 2 of the federal men closed in, wrenching Barlow from the saddle. The folder passed from Lydia's hands into the real marshal's, its contents already enough to end Barlow's hold on the territory. As the dust began to settle, Lydia stepped into the yard, her face lit faintly by a dying torch. The real Mary Ann, she said quietly to Sam, was my sister. She tried to stop him. That's why he killed her. Sam met her gaze, the truth settling heavy between them. Then he looked to where Barlow stood in chains, the crooked marshal beside him. The real marshal nodded toward the house. You're clear now, Carver, but you'll want to pack up before morning. This place will draw the wrong kind of attention for a while. Sam glanced at Lydia. Her grip on the empty folder had eased, but the resolve in her eyes hadn't faded. For the first time that night, the yard was quiet. The riders were gone, the torches dead, and above them the clouds had begun to break. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, low, steady, and promising rain. Lydia stepped closer. Now we start over, she said. Sam nodded once. Together. And in the east the first drops began to fall. Rain came slow, as if the sky feared to touch the burned edge of night. It tapped the porch rail, then thickened until the yard blurred and the ash smell of spent powder washed toward the road. The federal men rode out with their prisoners in a ragged line, torch smoke unraveling behind them. Frank Barlow kept glancing back, at the house, at Sam, like a man seeing his own past struck from the ledger. The crooked marshal sat slumped, lips pale, hat gone. Chains spoke for both of them. Keep the lamp in the window till dawn, the true marshal told Sam, reins wet in his hand. If any of Barlow's boys drift this way, they'll think we're still near. He looked once at Lydia. You did right. Then they were thunder receding over wet earth. Silence took the yard. The cows, 3 ghosts of what Sam had once owned, lifted their heads to the rain, chewing as if unbothered by law or ruin. Lydia let out a breath she must have been holding all night and leaned her shoulder to the doorframe. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. The quiet between them was closer than hands. Inside, the house smelled of lamp oil and damp wood. Sam set his rifle across the table as though returning an axe to its notch. The leather folder lay open, empty now, its spine shaped by months of fear and careful turning. Lydia pressed it flat and slid it into the stove's cold belly. She didn't light a match. You going to miss the fight? She asked. Sam shook his head. I never liked it. only liked getting past it. Past it, she echoed, tasting the words. He poured water from the cistern into tin cups. The first swallow felt like a promise he hadn't known how to make earlier, that his hands could carry something other than a weapon. Lydia drank and looked through the wavy glass of the window at the black fields. Lightning stitched a pale seam along the horizon, and in its blink she saw furrows carved months ago, too hard and dust-blind then to bear a seed. Now the rain wrote soft answers into them. "They'll come asking," she said. "Neighbors." A preacher with more questions than prayers. "Bank men." Sam nodded. "Let them come in daylight. And after daylight? We plant. Or we sell. We decide together." Lydia considered the empty stove, the bare shelf where a wedding picture should have stood. "I never wanted a house like this," she said, not unkindly. "I never wanted to be anyone's bargain." "You aren't," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever again." She closed her eyes, listening to the rain thicken until it was all one sound. When she opened them, her face looked lighter, as if some band around her ribs had at last been cut loose. "Mary Ann wouldn't have believed I could make it this far without poison," she said. "She used to carry a small vial when our stepmother was cruel. Not to use. Just to know she could end a thing before it swallowed her." She smiled once, quick and broken, then let the smile go. "Frank did that swallowing for her." Sam said nothing. The house could hold grief. Walls were for that as much as shelter. They worked without speaking, mending what the night had loosened, setting a bucket under the leak above the pantry, dragging a wet saddle blanket off the floor. He lifted the fallen latch that had caught him earlier and set it on the sill, a quiet truce with all the metal pieces. Toward morning the rain eased. Birds tried thin notes from the cottonwoods by the dry creek. The lamp in the window burned small and steady. Sam slept in a chair for an hour, boots on, hat over his face, as if waiting for a bell only he could hear. Lydia sat on the floor with her back against the bed and watched the gray come in. She woke him with coffee. "We need to walk the fence," she said. "If a post went down in the storm, the cows will find it before we do." They went together, Sam carrying a mallet and 3 nails in his pocket, the way he had as a young man when the land still believed him. The ground yielded under their boots, giving up footprints where yesterday it would have smothered them in dust. At the north corner, a stretch of wire had sagged where a long dead branch had fallen from the cottonwood and dragged it low. Lydia pressed her weight against the post while Sam set the nail, the mallet thudding like a slowed heartbeat. He felt her steady on the other side of the wood, a pressure that said stay. They met a wagon on the lane as they came back. A neighbor boy driving, his hair plastered to his forehead, a cream can rattling in the back. Will Ransom raised a hand that trembled only a little when he saw Sam and Lydia together. "Pa sent me. Said if you were dead we'd carry you to the churchyard before the bank men saw." His eyes skittered to Lydia. "Ma baked. She always bakes when she can't sleep." The boy passed down a loaf wrapped in a towel and a jar of early peaches put up in syrup that looked like bottled August. "They said there was shooting," he whispered, as if the prairie might overhear. "There was," Sam said. "There won't be now." Will looked at Lydia. "Mrs. Carver?" Lydia lifted her chin. "Miss Hunt will do for now. Ma says names stick better when folks choose them themselves." He tipped his hat, cheeks pink, and drove on, the wagon wheels making soft commas in the wet road. Back inside, Lydia sliced the bread with a careful knife. They ate in the doorway, steam from their cups carrying the faint green smell of boiled coffee. "He said, for now," she murmured. "That sounds right. Truth should arrive before the name," Sam said. "We'll give both room." By noon, more wagons came, a slow parade of the town's small courage. Cletus Hartwell brought fence wire and 3 men who pretended they had just been out for a drive and found themselves in need of honest labor. Reverend Wilder came with his hat twisted in his hands and no sermon loaded in his mouth, which Sam decided was a mercy. He stood in the yard and stared at the scorched patches where torches had fallen and said only, "The rain was sent at the right hour." He left a sack of seed corn on the porch without explanation. Deputy Ellen Vale, new badge, steady eyes, the true marshal's letter in her pocket. Arrived at dusk. She read the part that mattered. The arrests acknowledged, the testimony scheduled, the property protected until hearings concluded. Barlow's lines are snapped, she said. They'll try to knot them back together. But it's hard to splice rope that's been set on fire. She looked to Lydia. Do you wish to make a statement? Lydia straightened, then spoke plainly. Her sister's real name, the day Frank raised his hand, the signatures forged, the farms bled. Ellen wrote fast, then slower when Lydia said, I wanted to kill him, but I didn't. I want that on the page too. The deputy nodded and underlined it. Night fell soft as clean wool. Crickets worked at the edges of the fields like tiny clockmakers. Sam set the lamp again, not for rescue now but because ritual has its own mercy. Lydia stood beside him and watched the glass bloom with flame. What will you plant first? She asked. Something stubborn, Sam said. Sorghum, maybe. Beans. Where the ground remembers water. And me. You'll tell me, he said, when the telling feels right. She took the medallion from the folder's old pocket, a brass token the agents had left as a receipt for evidence, and set it on the mantel beside Sam's one photograph. His wife and child fading into a square of silver time. Lydia hadn't asked about them and he hadn't spoken, but the picture lived there like a gentle law. She touched the edge of the frame. They'd have liked the rain, she said. They'd have liked the silence after. He let the words settle. They would have liked that someone stayed when trouble asked it, he said at last. Later, when the house breathed evenly and the yard held to its new peace, Sam walked out to the barn without a lamp. He could find the door by memory and by the way the damp wood swelled a little against his palm. He checked each stall, each hinge, the shovels, the rake with one missing tine he kept meaning to mend. It comforted him to see that not everything required confession or a court. Some things needed only the next good hour and a man's two hands. Lydia followed him, barefoot, her hem dark with dew. I can't sleep, she said. Too much quiet where there wasn't any. He handed her an old blanket from the tack hook and they sat on the threshold where barn and night met like old friends. The rain had ended. Stars blinked through torn cloud. From far off, the river spoke in a voice he'd forgotten, low and satisfied. Lydia leaned her head against the post and spoke as if she were telling it to the dark rather than to him. I kept the vial anyway, she said. After I learned the poison was nothing, colored water and lies, I kept it to remind myself not to believe easy answers. I think I can throw it away now. You could keep the glass, he said. A little bottle might hold wildflowers. Or nails. She smiled. You a practical man, Sam Carver. I'm a man who has been wrong enough to know the right thing when it comes in simple. They sat until the owls moved closer to the fence line. When they rose, the blanket carried the sweet hay scent of the loft and Lydia's hair had taken on the barn's faint cedar memory. At the door, she paused. You said we plant. You said we sell. You said we decide. I want to add something. He waited. We forgive. Not here, she added, seeing his jaw tighten. Not that man and not that crime, but the world around it, the neighbors who didn't know, the ones who guessed and were afraid. We forgive them before they ask. Otherwise, we'll never be light enough to lift what's next. He tasted the words the way he tasted rain earlier, suspicious and grateful at once. All right, he said. We'll try it your way. And when forgiveness can't hold, truth will. Truth first, she agreed. Then whatever follows without breaking us. In the weeks that came, the county learned to say their names side by side without dropping its gaze. Testimony braided with weather. And when Lydia took the stand, she did not tremble. She told it clean. No one argued with the rain that pattered against the courthouse windows while she spoke. On the farm, beans lifted their small green vowels from mud, and the sorghum wrote its tall script across the far acre. The 3 cows put on weight, and one morning Sam woke to Lydia's laughter at the gate. A calf, all knees and astonishment, had entered the world like a promise delivered late and therefore more dear. Some evenings they walked the fence and spoke of Marianne. They did not turn her into a saint. They let her be brave and wrong and loving and too quick to trust the wrong quiet. In speaking her name without heat, they put a kind of candle in the field that did not burn down. Summer turned the creek into a living line again. Children from town, Will among them, brought seed packets and questions. Lydia taught them to read land deeds for the traps inside the flourishes. Sam showed them how to listen to wire. A good fence sings when it's right and stays mute when it's waiting for a storm. One dusk, Deputy Vale rode by with news. Barlow had confessed to the 2 murders people never spoke aloud, and to the 50 thefts the county had learned to carry like weather. The crooked marshal turned state's witness. His words slick as old tallow but worth enough to light a few rooms. "There's talk of new elections," she said. "Less talk of fear." After she left, Lydia stood in the yard a long time. "Justice is cold," she said finally. "It's supposed to be," Sam answered. "That way it doesn't burn the ones near the fire." She took his hand then, not as a pledge but as a way to share temperature. They watched lightning breathe beyond the far hills. It didn't come closer. The field lay still as a held breath, then let itself go. In the deepest part of night, when the house had memorized their footsteps and no longer woke at the sound, Sam dreamed he was a boy again walking behind his father's plow. The soil rolled over like a book opening, each page dark and waiting. He woke with his hand curved as if around a handle and found Lydia sleeping with the slightest crease between her brows, some old fear closing the door behind it. He smoothed the crease with a fingertip and felt the way the past sometimes allowed itself to be gentled. Come autumn, they harvested what the rain and their stubbornness had made. The beans thudded like soft coins in the pail. The sorghum bent solemn and sweet. They paid the bank enough to hush a particular voice. They kept back a sack for those who had come with bread on the day after. The rest they stored in the small granary, and when Sam hung the lock, he felt not secrecy but stewardship. On a clear morning after the first frost silvered the fence wire, Lydia walked to the edge of the old ash circle where torches had fallen. She knelt and pushed 3 seeds into the soot-rich ring, then patted the dirt flat. "For Mary Ann," she said. "For any man who learns late. For the women who talk each other back from the water." Sam did not bless the ground. He let the moment belong to her. When she stood, they entered the house together, the door catching a little on its swollen sill. The good kind of resistance, the kind that reminds you wood and weather are in conversation. Peace did not arrive like a parade. It came the way the rain had, shy, then sure, entering every crack and waiting until the house held it the way a hand holds breath in the cold. Sam sometimes woke to old sounds, the clatter of iron on a saddle, the crunch of boots in dry grass, and found only the wind nudging the porch step. Lydia sometimes started at a knock and discovered it was a bird thumbing the window with its small courage. They learned to name these gentler noises and keep them. In the ledger Sam used to track debts he could not pay. He wrote a different line at the bottom the day the first calf weaned. "One man can keep a war from starting." He didn't sign it. Lydia read it and added beneath, in her careful hand, "Kindness over strength." Then she turned the page and left it blank for whatever would ask to be written next.